Have you discovered that your home insurance doesn't cover you for the full value of the damage that you've experienced in your property? Well, there may be something in your policy that protects you. This video is part of our series called Rebuild and Build Better. So be sure to like the video, subscribe to Undercover Architect's channel, and then hit the bell so that you're always notified when we publish a new video. Whether you've already experienced damage to your property or you're investigating home insurance policies and comparing policies from one to the other, this video is going to help you understand 3 key policy sections that you need to check out to understand what your full coverage options are. Knowing this information up front about your policy could make a huge difference to the outcome should you suffer damage or total loss to your home. I'm Amelia Lee from Undercover Architect, and I help and teach homeowners how to get it right when designing, building and renovating their family homes. In this interview, I speak with David Keane from Solve My Claim. David Keane's been in the insurance industry for over 24 years now, and he created Solve My Claim to help and assist homeowners navigate their insurance claims and disputes. In the last 3 years alone, Solve My Claim has helped homeowners secure more than $24 million in additional insurance claim settlements. So let's dive in.
Now, in terms of, if you know that your insurance policy isn't enough for the damage, if you've realised, okay, for example, you've had total loss with these fires, you built before perhaps the BAL ratings came through your area, you know that whatever you're going to rebuild is going to need to measure up to a whole new standard of construction, and it's going to cost more than what you had currently insured for. You talked a little bit before about additional benefits. What's your scope with this in terms of seeing that underinsured amount?
Yeah, look, it really depends on the policy, and this is, I guess, a preface to my answer is one thing that I do come across many times is people actually having no idea what they're insured for and no idea what their policy says. And what constantly amazes me is that we go and spend $1 million on a home and then try and save $50 on the insurance, and without even looking at what we're actually foregoing. So with that preface, it's so interesting to see the difference in the benefits that policies offer. And so generally, and most people look at an insurance PDS and their eyes glaze over because it's 100 pages and they think, oh, I'm not going to read 100 pages. But you actually don't really need to. A lot of that is stuff that is not critical, and there are critical areas that everybody must read in their policy, even if you're not going to read the full thing. Now, one of those is a section that will usually be entitled Additional Benefits or something similar. It'll usually be found just after there's a section saying what events are covered, what type of loss events are covered, and after that you'll see the additional benefits. In that section, some policies will cover, for example, when a catastrophe has been declared. And what they mean by that is by the Insurance Council, not necessarily by the government, but the Insurance Council has certain parameters where they declare an event to be a catastrophe event. The bushfires absolutely are. Several of the hailstorms that have hit various parts of the country recently have been declared catastrophe events. Many normal storms aren't. So if something's declared a catastrophe, some policies will cover you maybe an additional 10%, 20% over and above your sum insured if it's a total loss and the sum insured is not adequate. There are some areas and I should say in the additional benefits, when you look at that section, there's usually a spiel straight under the heading, and it'll tell you whether these benefits are in addition to your sum insured or included in your sum insured. That's a critical factor. Some policies will cover, for example, 10% over and above your sum insured for demolition and removal of debris. Now, a good insurance company should tell you that right up front and should say, okay, you've insured for $400,000, but you've also got $40,000 for demolition and removal of debris. I've seen cases where some companies haven't told you that. And if you don't know, you've missed out on $40,000 that you're entitled to. Some also cover additional, one particular benefit that's in many of those policies says that any statutory or regulatory requirements in respect to compliance, upgrades, building code, NCC, National Construction Code, they call it now, which includes things like bushfire attack level, the BAL ratings. It includes things in Queensland, for example, like cyclone ratings. There's all sorts of changes to the National Construction Code every couple of years. And homeowners are not required to continually upgrade their house every 2 years for obvious reasons. And so most homes are not compliant right now with today's National Construction Code. This is a big issue in the bushfire areas because many of those homes were built before, as you pointed out, the bushfire attack level assessments and standards were introduced. And so rather than people's rebuild cost being less than their sum insured in this event, we're finding many have nowhere near enough sum insured in the policy to cover what the rebuild's going to cost. And that can be even a bigger problem. It can be incredibly annoying if the insurance company goes to pay you out less than your sum insured. But if you can rebuild the house for that, then at least you can probably live with that and move on. If you've only got 50% covered and it's going to cost you twice as much to rebuild, that can be catastrophic for people. And so it's critical. I would say probably the two biggest sections in your policy you must know intimately well is what events are you covered for? What additional benefits does your policy cover you for, and what specific exclusions are listed in your policy? If you don't at least read those three sections, then you're setting yourself up for a massive fall.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know that the whole issue around when we went through the gap storms was this whole thing about what was a storm created opening versus what was, because if it wasn't a storm created opening, then it wasn't going to be covered. And so it was this kind of whole game of semantics of where the tree fell on the roof versus where the water that poured in the hole created by the tree poured through the floorboards into the garage below and destroyed tools that apparently wasn't going to be covered. And it was just, I can see it is. And you're right. People get those PDSs and they're big, unwieldy documents that just seem full of jargon that nobody understands. But it's great that you've pointed out those specific sections to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned the storm created openings. That's probably one of the big ones that we argue quite a lot, because in essence what that means is unless the storm has caused an opening to your property, then you won't be covered for resultant damage. So generally an insurance policy won't cover you for the cause. So let's take the storm as an example. Let's say maybe you've got an old roof, there's a bit of rust on there, a few little maintenance issues like most roofs would have, and then a storm comes and water comes in. Generally, you'd be covered for the resulting water damage, but you've got to fix your roof. Unless you're dealing with a cyclone where the strong winds have lifted the roof, therefore the roof is now part of the resultant damage. So your policy only covers you for resultant damage. But depending what that cause is, if they deem that the proximate cause or the dominant cause factor is the condition of your roof rather than that storm, they'll also deny the resulting damage. And so an argument we have with insurance companies all the time is what was the proximate cause? Taking the bushfire example, I talked before about fire is covered as long as there's flame. Now, the insurance companies can use semantics, but we can as well, because in my view, unless that policy says that there has to have been flame at your property, then we can say, well, there was flame. There was flame. Maybe the flame didn't damage the property, but the fire damage is covered where there was flame. And so a lot of this is an argument in semantics. And unfortunately for the average consumer, it's not something that they've dealt with before. And even when they try and go through the dispute process with the insurance company or with the Ombudsman, AFCA, they'll try and argue on the basis of their emotional reasoning. So, this is unfair. I've been with the company for 20 years. And that's not going to win you a dispute. The dispute's going to be won or lost on the terms of the PDS. And so, there are many cases. I was just actually reading the AFCA figures that they've just put out for 2019 disputes. And for many of the insurance companies, by the time those disputes went right through to the AFCA, the Ombudsman panel, something like 75% were deemed in favour of the insurance company. Now, when we go to AFCA, we're winning, or we're having decisions in the favour of the client at well over 70 or 80% of the time. And the only difference there is the basis of the argument. And so it's one of my little bugbears is I'm often told by insurance companies and by AFCA, well, people shouldn't need a consultant to come and run that process for them, or an advocate to run that process for them, because it's a free service. And it is a free service, but there is such a disparity in the knowledge base of the two parties. So it's like you defending yourself in a Supreme Court criminal case without having any knowledge about the legal system. But possibly you can win, but really you're going to get completely trounced by a good defence lawyer most of the time, or a good prosecutor most of the time. And that, I guess that's my concern for people, is that they're expected to know all of these things and to respond at the level of the insurance company without having that knowledge.
Yeah, this is why I'm just so glad to be able to introduce you to the UA community, because if Solve My Claim had existed when we were going through, our situation, like I know that we were very fortunate that we managed to find a forensic engineer who lived locally. He was a man that was in his 80s, and he was just passionate about helping us level the playing field, basically. So he helped us navigate and understand. And because as an architect, I've often argued town planning law and gone, okay, well, if we're going to object a development application, we have to do it with the rules of the town planning and actually go through. So I had that framework in mind to then look at, okay, let's look at the insurance policy and how do we use the insurance policy to argue for what we're asking for rather than them using it against what we've asked for. But it was 13 months of our life, and it was this roller coaster of being worn down, and my husband and I just being stubborn and being supported as well by people around us. So I think that for Solve My Claim to exist and be able to help people navigate what is something that is just such a bottomless well of kind of information and knowledge, I think is so needed. So it's just brilliant.
Yeah. The last straw for me was the 2011 Brisbane floods. I was at the time assessing. I was subcontracting to one of the major assessing companies who had a contract from one of the major insurance companies. I'll leave names out of it. We had something like 1,000 claims to assess. I had a team that I was leading. We knew that all of those claims would be denied because flood wasn't covered. We weren't allowed to tell the people they would be denied. We had to say, look, it's still being established and we need to do the assessment and go through the process to ensure that the insurance company had the info they needed for any claims that were disputed down the track. But I was going into homes, home after home, knowing that these people's lives are about to be completely overturned and they've already had the trauma of the flood, and now they've got the trauma of not knowing yet, but soon to find out that their $200,000 worth of damage won't be covered. And there was one couple in particular, it was an old couple, and he had Alzheimer's. He'd gone into a nursing home, really gone downhill, and so his wife had brought him back home to live the last few months of his life. And then weeks later, the floods hit. And he was just sitting there, and he was just so confused. He didn't know where he was, and it was just seeing that human toll. And I'd already for many years felt really uncomfortable at a lot of what I had seen throughout my involvement in the industry. And I just thought, someone's got to stand up for the little guy. Somebody's got to jump the fence and start applying our expertise for the consumer. And the following year was when we first looked at Solve My Claim and started putting it in place. It's very rewarding to know that you can come in and change people's lives, because we really are. We're dealing with, in many cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage. If we lose this case, then these people's lives are never going to be the same. The next 20 years is going to be recovering from this loss. And if we can actually get the decision overturned, and we don't just try for anything. Like if you're covered, you're covered. If you're not, we can't change the facts to make it that you are. But at least people get an impartial and independent view on, yes, what they're saying is actually correct in this case. And I find that people can, even in those few instances where we can't help someone, at least they can reconcile a bit more that, okay, I've heard this from a trusted source. It's not just the insurance company giving me spin, and they can get on with life.
It actually then empowers you to know that you took some control back as well, to, in a situation where you would feel completely out of control. And I think that's, it's offering a huge solace to people in that situation. So
did you find that helpful? Well, go ahead and pop your comments below. And whilst you're there, check out the other resources that we have to help you on Undercover Architect. They're all listed there in the description. Now, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Undercover Architect's YouTube channel, and hit the bell so that you're notified every time a new video is published. And we've also got these videos to help you out as well for further watching. As always, thank you for tuning in and for letting me be your secret ally. Until next time, bye.